Hey there, Brady here with your daily tennis lessons. So we're looking at coaching styles this week at DTL. First, want to introduce my buddy Ian, Essential Tennis. Ian, great to have you here, bud.
Hey, thanks for having us. Joel and I are both really excited to be here.
Yeah, for sure. So we want to look at the forehand today. We're going to look at a couple parts of the forehand, just kind of bounce some ideas off each other. You might have certain styles you like with backswing, grip, all that stuff.
Yeah.
We've got Joel here to be our vehicle to take a peek at with the swing. So let's get into it. I think all of you out there at some point or another have gone to a coach or an instructor and said, yeah, but my coach told me to do this. And you know, you and I get that, and it's like, we know there's some variety that needs to happen. It's not all cookie cutter.
Yep.
But when it comes to the grip, I think for me, I just think there's only two grips that most club level players should use, would be either Eastern or semi-Western. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I'm pretty much exactly in the same boat. For me, Continental just takes away too much potential to be able to create topspin. And on the other extreme, full Western obviously makes topspin very easy, but makes driving the ball extremely awkward just because the hand is so far underneath the grip. For me, I'm always looking for an even balance, more or less, between forward energy or force or like drive and upward energy or, you know, spin potential.
Big time. And I, being tall, I'm always been an Eastern, you know, grip guy because I love to penetrate the court. I think the genesis probably of that full Western was probably for little kids maybe who needed help against the high ball. Yeah. I don't love the full Western simply because now anything down low for somebody that's grown becomes really tricky. But totally agree that a Eastern grip really helps with the promotion of moving the ball through the court, and the semi-Western now is a great addition of topspin and net clearance, along with still getting some good movement. So Joel here, Joel, you've been playing in a semi-Western grip, correct? Cool. So let's take a look at a couple of Joel's forehands here in his semi-Western. Good. And you guys are going to be able to see as he makes contact in a semi-Western, the ball is just naturally getting some good rotation. Really good. Let's go one more here. Yeah, really good rotation. And again, that grip doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a ton of spin. There are other elements to it, but it definitely promotes good spin.
Yeah, I'm a semi-Western hitter myself, but I tend to fall into kind of a flatter drive kind of swing path, which is unfortunate because the whole point of semi-Western should be to be able to create more spin in theory. And actually something, do you mind if we see a few more shots from Joel?
Not at all.
Joel, can we, those last couple swings were probably what, like a 4 or 5 out of 10 like effort? Can we, let's see you ramp up a little bit faster, please, with a couple of feeds here. I'd like to see, that's kind of what I was expecting to see.
Right.
So as Joel speeds up, his path becomes much more lateral, and that's kind of what happens to me when I play. Yep. So something that I would encourage Joel to work on is just because he swings faster doesn't mean he has to necessarily flatten his swing path. Right. I'd love to see him work on generating a little bit more heaviness when he goes harder.
Absolutely. And I would call one more adjustment to that, which I think is we're gonna see it as well as we start to look into his take back, would just be a little bit more space off the baseline. Because I feel like any player that's looking to go that semi-Western and possibly slip into full Western sometimes needs more space from the baseline to create that arc that grip tends to promote. Okay, so looking at backswing. I've always been a C-shaped kind of guy, Ian. I love that look of a Federer where it's just a super clean up. And as we see at the club level a lot, things get chopped up more into that L shape. So I'm always a big fan of just that clean C shape that delivers the racket down and underneath the tennis ball where the player doesn't look like they're working too hard on the backside of the stroke.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm all for using gravity as a tool to kind of start to build energy and build momentum of the racket by starting a little bit higher. I think especially back when I was growing up, like taking lessons, like in the 90s, early 2000s, there was a pocket of time in there where everybody was really kind of emphasizing the C, and it started, I guess with my one asterisk or caveat would be don't necessarily make the C or like feel like you have to generate this big like loop,
Sure.
you know, like back in the 90s. As long as people are leaning in that direction, I generally, yeah, I like that circular path a lot.
Big time. So let's take a peek at Joel's swing again, specifically his take back, see if there's anything we might change about it or if we just love it maybe. So you guys can see the tip of that racket gets up after he makes his unit turn. I'd still probably, yeah, I'd like to see Joel get a little more underneath the ball as you come off the bottom there.
Yeah, I agree.
Again, it can't hurt to have a little more height, which that lower drop's going to create because you're working back up.
And lower.
Exactly.
Overall, I like Joel's unit turn and take back a lot. It's his body leading his hand as opposed to a mistake I think a lot of players make, going back to that kind of exaggerated C, is their hand will move independent a lot of times of the body and just kind of exaggerate it.
Sure.
So I think the take back, in general, I totally agree with your thoughts on like dropping it lower so he can get a little more shape as he ramps up the swing speed.
Yeah. And then the one other element to that backswing, if you feel like you're working in that C shape, would be to, you know, figure out how big it should get based on your ability to time a swing. Like for me, I get a little greedy. I tend to go pretty big.
Don't we all?
And it can get bad once in a while, but when it clicks, it's awesome. So I think a player like Joel here could feasibly play around with going a little bit higher if the ball probably gave you a little more time. And if the ball's coming in a little bit quicker, can't hurt to make a little bit of a shallower C shape.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so let's get on to part number 3, which is going to be the follow through. And I'm gonna defer to you here first. What do you like to see? Because there's so many modifications, especially at the pro game now with the forehand follow through.
So I guess my whole theory or general fundamental thought on the follow through is it should be a result of what happened before it in the swing.
Yeah.
So personally, like in my own coaching, I almost never ask somebody to finish in a particular spot on purpose, because I feel like if what happened before in the swing doesn't really support that arbitrary sometimes. There's been a lot of, you know, cliche kind of phrases over the years that players have kind of taken as like gospel messaging in terms of like the windshield wiper was, you know, all the rage, you know, for a while. And then it was like, no, catch the racket. Way back before, you know, we were coming up in tennis, it was, you know, point and follow through and like finish towards like the target. And so over the years, there's been all these positions for finishing that might not have anything to do with how the body moved or the path the racket was on beforehand. So anytime there's more of a steep swing, it should be more of a windshield wiper type of finish. If it's more of like a even balance between forward and upwards, that would be more of like a racket catch position. I understand like the catch the racket as like a training drill or like developmental, you know, aid, but I'm not big on like pigeonholing students into a particular position.
Me too.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would go out there for all of you 3-5, maybe budgeting 4-0 players. The catch the racket idea is, again, I think all based on just making sure the racket comes to rest naturally at the end. And as you've done, as I've done, we've broken down so much video of pro players. We'll see a racket come to rest naturally behind a player's shoulder. We'll see Federer come up on a short forehand and it's right behind his left hip and it looks very natural. So I'm with you. Don't pigeonhole the follow through. It's just, it can't hurt, I think, to come back to a catch the racket finish if you go through bouts where it feels completely unnatural where you're finishing.
I like how you're using natural, and I think it's important to point out that any style of follow through can be the natural one, but on the flip side, any particular style of finish could also be very unnatural given how the player is swinging the racket before contact.
Totally agree.
So I think for me, the biggest thing is just marrying or matching the finish with kind of the style of player that we're talking about. And also the point situation, like you're saying, like short ball, low ball, trying to like massage it a little more is gonna be totally different than like falling back on like back foot and hitting more of a defensive shot.
So let's take a peek at a few of Joel's follow throughs. Mark, maybe mix up the feet a little bit so we see if he can modify these at all.
Yeah, I like that. It's getting intense over there. I like it.
Yeah. So that's, you know, that's one right there where he's fallen away. I feel like that should come up a little more vertically. And
yeah, I agree.
some players like Joel, obviously good hitter, might get that feeling where that follow through comes in like a seat belt and just kind of sticks on your body, which I'm always a big believer that whether we go from buggy whip to traditional to wraparound, always a little bit of space between the arm and the body is a great idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting just talking through it and seeing Joel hit. It looked to me like, I don't want to say he was necessarily trying to finish the same way every time, but maybe there's a little bit of subconscious, like, whatever the phrase is, you know. Yeah, right. Being told, like, what's the phrase you think you've been told the most over the years related to the follow through? Finish high? Yeah,
Finish
sure.
high.
A million different things. And so if you take that generally good, you know, advice to finish higher than contact, and you apply it to all those different feeds that Mark delivered him, it might end up being kind of tight because it doesn't really match.
But my coach told me this, Ian.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so let's get to our last point here, which is contact point, and this is where I don't ever feel like there's a ton of wiggle room. You know, wherever that stance is based for any particular shot, even a buggy whip, which we know is a later contact point, we're never letting contact on purpose get behind our body.
Sure.
Buggy whip might be just parallel to my right foot as a right-hander, but for the most part, I'm trying to make contact slightly in front of wherever I stand to the ball.
Yeah, and I think it's, for me, it's just kind of worth pointing out, again, kind of the nuance of it, depending on the style of hitter somebody is. Like a Federer is a very straight arm, you know, contact, whereas a lot of WTA players are much more of a bent arm, still hitting incredible world-class shots, obviously. Or like the further your grip happens to be, generally speaking, the further back contact will be, whereas a continental forehand is going to be, you know, much further out in front. In general, so I think the little details are really important. But broadly speaking, I totally agree. Like behind, you know, the body, you're going to be struggling. It's going to be difficult to create any kind of pace or power.
Cool. All right, so now on to why we have you here in person this week. You're written a book here with Joel.
Yeah.
Give us the title of the book.
Yeah, the title of the book is Essential Tennis, and it's our effort to kind of distill everything that I've learned across the last 20 years of coaching, put it into one really helpful resource for players. It's 38 chapters that are basically my biggest fundamental principles for success across technique, strategy, the mental game, and we're really excited about getting it out there.
Fantastic. Looking forward to having you here the rest of the week.
Absolutely.
But for now, that's it. So please click like below this video, and if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please do so, as well as check down below me in the description of this video. You'll find a link to 3 free courses that Mark and I have put together. I think you'll find those super helpful as well. All right, so until next time, Ian and I signing out.
Take care.